unanimously. Then yesterday, there was this. An assistant secretary down at the Department of Labor is now telling people they're under no legal obligation to let employees know if they will lose their jobs.
The U.S. Senate is about to gavel back into session. More discussion is expected on the cybersecurity bill this afternoon. This is live coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
You're a member of the United States Marine Corps, though you no longer wear the uniform. I believe once a Marine, always a Marine. And your service in Vietnam and to the nation as Secretary of Navy is just well known and well appreciated. You know, Mr. President, you've served as a Marine Corps, in the Marine Corps and as Secretary of the Navy, and now you're in the Senate as a member of the Democratic Party. You really served the nation. And you know, I come to the floor today to talk about cybersecurity and the need to pass cybersecurity legislation this week in this body. And Mr. President, I come to the floor not as a Democrat. I come to the floor as a patriot. I say to my colleagues in the United States Senate, this week on this floor, the United States Senate has a rendezvous with destiny. We have pending before us cybersecurity legislation, a framework to protect critical infrastructure, the .com world, against cyber attacks from those who have predatory, hostile intent to the United States of America. Now, we are bogged down. We are not moving. We're once again following what has become a usual pattern in the Senate, that when all is said and done, more is going to get said than gets done. But, Mr. President, I say to you, and to anyone listening and anyone watching, we cannot let that happen. The United States of America is in danger. And this danger is not something in the future. It is not something written in science fiction books. This is not the wave that's going to come. It's happening right now. In cyber attacks on our banking services, our personal identity, our trade secrets, things that I'll talk about more. Now, the naysayers here say we can't pass this bill because it'll be over-regulation and it will lead to strangulation. And oh my gosh, we can't ask the private sector to spend one dime on protecting itself. Well, let me say to my friends, because I respect healthy criticism, but I want them to know that if anything happens to the United States of America, if the grid goes down, if NASDAQ goes down, if our banking system goes down, when we will not be able to function because the streetlights won't be on, that we won't be able to turn the electricity on, I will tell you what will happen. Once again, politicians will overreact, we will overregulate, and we will overspend. Now, in a very judicious, well-thought-for, well-discussed process, we could come up with a legislative framework that would defend the United States of America and at the same time balance that sensible center that another great patriot, Colin Powell, calls us to do. Always look for the middle ground while we look at where we want to go. Now, there is this cyber war, and I want everybody to know about it. The cyber attacks are happening right now. Cyber terrorists are thinking every single day about attacking our critical infrastructure. There are nation states that want to humiliate and intimidate the United States of America to cause catastrophic economic disruption. How do they want to do it? They want to take over our power grids. They want to steal, they want to disrupt our air traffic control. They want to disrupt the financial functionings of the United States of America. Cyber spies are working at breakneck speed to steal many of our state secrets. Cyber criminals are hacking our networks. Cyber attacks, so what are we talking about on this bill? We are talking about critical infrastructure. Now, Mr. President, I'm a senator from Maryland. You're a senator from Virginia. Remember that freaky storm a couple of weeks ago? Remember Pepco? Oh, boy, I'm still got my ears ringing from my constituents calling about Pepco. I can tell you what it was like in Baltimore when that freaky storm hit. You couldn't get around. The stoplights were down. It was like the Wild West getting around. You could go into stores if they were open, and nothing functioned. The lights weren't on. The refrigeration was off. Business was losing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Families, like a mother with an infant child and another child with no electricity for 5 days, going to a hotel room. Now, you want to talk about this bill cost too much money? Just look at what it cost the National Capital Region of the United States of America because of a freaky storm. Now, it took us 5 days to get the utilities back on because of the utility company. But what happens if our destiny is outside of our control? That the cyber terrorists have turned off the lights in America and we can't turn them back on. It's going to cost too much? Hey, wait till this kind of thing happens. I don't want it to happen. And we can prevent it from happening. And we can do it in a way that understands the needs of business. I want to understand the needs of business. But I sure understand the needs of families. I need to understand the effects of small business. For those who say it's going to cost too much and they have the concerns of the Chamber of Commerce, fine. I don't want to trash talk them. But my father owned a little neighborhood grocery store. I know what it's like when electricity went down. My father lost thousands of dollars because the frozen food melted. Lost thousands of dollars when we had a freaky storm because the refrigeration in his meats and products went bad. My father lost thousands of dollars years ago in a freaky storm. Mr. President, this bill means that if we come up with the kind of legislation we want, we can deal with it. Just remember what critical infrastructure means. It means the financial services. It means the grid. So when there is no power, schools are shut down, businesses shut down, public transit is crippled, no traffic lights are working. And by the way, over there in Virginia, didn't the 911 stop working? And they're still investigating? Don't we go up to investigate? Well, right now, I don't want to investigate and I don't want to castigate, but I sure want the Senate to be able to get going. And then there's the issue of financial services. The FBI is currently investigating 400 reported cases of corporate account attacks where cyber criminals have made unauthorized transfers from the bank accounts of United States business. The FBI tells me they're looking at the attempt to steal $255 million, an actual loss of $85 million. Hackers have already going into the New York Stock Exchange. They've already going into NASDAQ and the attempt to shut down or steal information. Gosh, if we allow this to continue, it could attack and cost us billions and billions of dollars. Mr. President, do you remember in 2010 we had a flash crash? New vocabulary, new things out there. The Dow plunged 1,000 points in a matter of minutes because automatic computerized traders shut down. This was a result of turbulent trading. But just imagine if terrorists or nation states that really don't like us, and I'm really not going to name them, but we really know who they are, really create flash crashes. Now, I know that there are patriots in this Senate who have really been the defenders of the nation in other wars. They have said themselves that they worry about the Asia-Pacific. They worry about China. You know, I worry about China, too. So while we're looking at the defense authorization and appropriation, and people want more aircraft carriers to defend us in the blue water against China, well, what happens if there's a cyber attack? Now, we do know how to protect .mil, but do we want to protect also .com in the same way? I think so. Now, I want to salute Senators Lieberman and Collins. They've come forth with a bill that does two things from a national security perspective. First of all, it tells business you voluntarily could come in. There is no mandate to participate. But if you do come in, you will get liability protection. Wow. In other words, we're actually going to offer incentives. We're actually going to offer good guy bonuses. We're not going to do it through tax breaks or more things to add to the deficit or debt. We're going to say, come on in, participate in both the setting of standards, we want you at the table, and then living by the standards. And for that, you will get liability protection. Now, there is also those who say, we just don't like Department of Homeland Security being in charge. We worry about a cyber Katrina. You know what? I worried about that too. But I must say, in all of our meetings, we can see that the Department of Homeland Security has made tremendous advances. I've been one of their sharpest critics in this area, and I've been skeptical from the beginning. But now as we've moved along and listening to Secretary Napolitano and General Alexander, the head of the National Security Agency, on how they can work together, honoring the Constitution and civil liberties, I think we have a good bill. Why do we need this bill? Well, General Alexander, who heads up the National Security Agency and the Cyber Command, says that we are facing attacks and potential of attacks that are mind-boggling. He talks about the stealing of trade secrets that amounts to the greatest transfer of wealth the country has ever seen. He worries about the security of the grid. He worries about financial services, while he also worries very much about the .com. But, Mr. President, you know, we live in the United States of America. We have constitutional government. Our military, no matter how powerful and how strong, has a responsibility to do certain areas, but we need a civilian agency in charge of how to protect .com, a civilian agency benefiting from the incredible turbo intellectual and technical power of the National Security Agency. So we've got a bill that offers the framework. I would also say, let's have a bill. Let's vote for cloture. Let's have a regular order with actually germane amendments. We have patriots here, but we need to act like, who are we for? Are we for protecting America? Or are we for coming up with the same old platitudes that resist any activity of government at all to protect the American people? Mr. President, I'm no Janie-come-lately to this bill. You know, I represent one of the greatest states in America. I'm the state that's the home to the National Security Agency. I have the high honor of being on the Intelligence Committee. I've been working on this topic for almost up to a decade. And I've watched the threat grow as I watched the technology against us grow in power and watching the number of people that could attack us in this area. I sit on the Appropriations Committee, where as a member of the DOD Appropriations, I've been proud to work with both the authorizers and Senator Inouye to stand up the Cyber Command, the 10th Fleet, which is a cyber fleet, and others related to it. But also, what I've been proud of is to be able to take a look at what we do need to do here in terms of everything from workforce to protecting others. Mr. President, I fund the FBI, and working with Director Mueller, I've been able to see up close and personal the growing threats right here in the United States of America, whether it's the cyber criminals, that can literally invade large banking. I could give example after example. Working also with other departments, we can see that they're in cyber attack. We need to be able to do this. So, Mr. President, I could give other examples, and I will do so on the debate. But let me summarize us. The attacks are now. The question is, are we going to build cyber bomb shelters? Now, this isn't like the old bunkers of old. This is where we work with the private sector. Remember, our grid and our telecommunications is owned and operated by the private sector. We cannot do this without the private sector. So we, your government, comes together with a legislative framework that's constitutionally sound, legally reliable, the fact that we will make the best and highest use of our military under that rubric. But at the end of the day, we will be able to have a voluntary framework bringing the private sector together with incentives, particularly around liability, that invites them to participate in the formulation of the regulation, the implementation of the regulation, and living by it. This is not regulation that leads to strangulation. This is regulation that helps them be able to protect the United States of America. So let me conclude by saying this. Everybody says, gee, what could I do? Could I have protected an attack on the United States of America? What's that little name group we didn't know how to spell 10 years ago? Wasn't it called something like Al-Qaeda? Would we have done anything in the world to protect the 9/11 attack? I certainly would. I certainly would. But I say here today, if you want to protect the next big attacks on the United States of America, vote for cloture. Let's have an informed debate. Let's find at the end of the day the sensible center that will give us a constitutionally but effective way of defending the United States of America. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Grasso.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today to do as I do week after week as a doctor who's practiced medicine in Wyoming, taking care of families from across our state for a quarter of a century, and to give a doctor's second opinion about the health care law. One of the central claims of President Obama and Democrats from Washington who voted here in this Senate chamber was that the health care law would extend insurance coverage for millions of Americans. So that was their goal. They claim that that is actually what has happened. The President claimed repeatedly that 30 million more Americans would receive health coverage because of the health care law. Well, after practicing for 25 years, I understand that there is a huge difference between health coverage and health care. When people have a health insurance card, then they have coverage. When people have access to a doctor or a nurse practitioner or physician assistants, then they can receive health care. The New York Times actually pointed that out this Sunday morning, front page, above the fold. They proclaim in the first paragraph of an article that the President's health care law delivers coverage, but not care. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, when I take a look at this article, Sunday, July 29th, 2012, New York Times, page 1 above the fold, doctor shortage likely to worsen with the health care law. Underneath it says primary care is scarce in bold letters, and beyond that, expanded coverage, but a greater strain on a burdened system. The story highlights a study from the Association of American Medical Colleges, which found that in 2015, just 3 years from now, the country will face a shortage of over 60,000 doctors. By 2025, the shortage is expected to expand to approximately 130,000. So while the nation was already facing this shortage, the article points out that it has been made worse by the President's health care law. The shortage of providers is very important because, as the article states, coverage will not necessarily translate into care. This is especially true for those individuals who are supposed to receive their health care through Medicaid. Remember, a huge expansion of Medicaid was a part of the President's health care law. It was part of the discussion in the Supreme Court, the decision that they came out with. And Medicaid, of course, is the program that provides health care for low-income Americans. You'll recall that the President's health care law contained one of the largest expansions of Medicaid in the program's history. Now, the President chose to expand the program despite the fact that fewer than half of primary care clinicians would accept new Medicaid patients as of 2008. Fewer than half of primary care clinicians were accepting new Medicaid patients. But yet that is where the President chose to build his health care reform from. So, say, why is it that so many physicians, primary care physicians, aren't seeing Medicaid patients? Well, it's because the reimbursements provided to doctors are so low that many simply can't afford to see Medicaid patients and continue to keep their doors open. Unfortunately, the outlook for Medicaid really in this country, Mr. President, has not improved. USA Today reported this month, in July, that 13 states are moving to cut Medicaid even further by doing a couple of things. They want to reduce benefits, they want to pay health providers less, or tighten eligibility for the program. So the program that the President highlights as one of the cores of his health care law is already in significant trouble, is not functioning, and is getting worse. So the state of Illinois has imposed a new limit on the number of prescription drugs that a patient can receive who's on Medicaid. This cap was imposed as part of a plan to cut $1.6 billion from the state's Medicaid program. Mark Hireman, a professor at the University of Chicago Law School, told the Chicago Tribune that the prescription drug limits amount to a denial of service. So that's what we're looking at now. And yet this is the basis upon which the President has built his health care law. According to the most recent estimate by the Congressional Budget Office, over one-third of the people expected to gain insurance coverage under the President's health care law are supposed to do it through this Medicaid program. Clearly, with states being forced to cut back their existing Medicaid programs, there are many people who are not going to get the care that they were promised through the President's health care law. For those who can find a physician, many of these patients will have to commute longer distances and will also have to endure longer waiting times just to get the treatment that they are seeking. Now, some experts have described this as an invisible problem, and they say that it's because people may still get care, but the process of receiving that care will be more difficult. Now, the chief executive of the California Medical Association says it results in delayed care and higher levels of acuity, meaning the seriousness of the injury or of the illness to that patient when they finally get the care that they need. So when care is delayed, medical problems can become much more serious, and that forces patients to seek treatment through other settings, and one of the prime examples of that is heading to the emergency room. Well, the whole goal, as I remember the debate here on the Senate floor, listening to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, was that then patients under the President's health care law, the Democrats claim, would be able to get to see a doctor, a primary care doctor, wouldn't have to go to the emergency room. But that's not what we're finding under the President's health care law. We're finding just the opposite of what the President had promised. That's why the American College of Emergency Physicians told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "While there are provisions in the law to benefit emergency patients, it is clear," they said, "that emergency visits will increase, as we have already seen nationwide." So the President says one thing, the American College of Emergency Physicians is telling you what they are seeing on a daily basis in the emergency rooms across the country. Put another way, since the President's health care law exacerbated the shortage of providers, more patients are seeking treatment in emergency rooms. It's not what the American people were looking for in health reform. So instead of making empty promises, supporters of the health care law should have dealt with the issues that are already causing many doctors to rethink their medical career. For example, supporters of the law absolutely refused to deal with the crushing burden of medical lawsuit abuse. It's an abusive situation that is forcing doctors to practice significant amounts of defensive medicine, which is very expensive. Expensive for patients, individual patients, as well as expensive for the system. The Harvard School of Public Health found that these costs amount to 2.4% of annual health spending in the United States, or $55 billion in 2008. Now, that's the Harvard School of Public Health. There are other estimates out there which go with much higher numbers. Apparently, supporters of the law thought it was more important to help trial lawyers instead of patients. So, as a matter of fact, Howard Dean, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, has said that they left lawsuit abuse out of the health care law because of the significant impact that the trial lawyers have as contributors to the Democratic Party. So here we are. Additionally, the health care law does nothing to stop the crushing burden of government regulations and paperwork that are consuming the health care profession. Finally, many people choose to become doctors because they enjoy being able to innovate and create the next generation of devices and treatments. Unfortunately, that is changing as a result of the significant taxes that are part of the health care law. In an article published on Friday, we have learned that Cook Medical, which is a medical device company in Indiana, announced that it was scrapping plans to expand because of the President's health care law. And there are similar companies in states all across the country, many with large medical institutions who have a history of the best innovation in the land and actually in the world, but are faced with these medical device taxes, not on profit, but on sales, on the gross amount of money sales. The company said that the 2.3% medical device tax contained in the law would stop the company from opening 5 new plants in the United States and adding approximately 300 new well-paying jobs. The Senate should also know that this Cook Medical Company produces medical devices that address women's health issues. Specifically, the company produces products related to gynecologic surgery, obstetrics, and assisted reproduction, just to name a few. So therefore, the President's health care law is actually hurting the ability of Cook Medical and other companies to provide American women with access to cutting-edge medical technology. Why? Because of the device tax, which I believe we should repeal the entire law. But clearly we have introduced legislation to repeal the medical device tax. It is a bipartisan piece of legislation supported from both parties and should be passed immediately. But it does seem that Democrats are reluctant to look at parts of the health care law and repeal the law. It means that medicine is becoming less of an attractive career choice for many young people across the country. And as CNN stated in a headline from July 29th, just 2 days ago, your health care is covered, they said, but who's going to treat you? So the President and Washington Democrats did not seem interested in addressing this question when the health care law was passed, and more effort was putting into hiring IRS agents to look into whether you had insurance than actually to see if there were doctors and nurse practitioners and others, physician assistants, to care for you. So instead of focusing on policies that would give incentives for more people to become health care providers, they filled their law with empty promises that the American people know today have not been kept. It is time for Congress to repeal the President's health care law, replace it with real reforms that will improve the ability of patients to get the care they need from a doctor they choose at lower cost. And that's, Mr. President, why I come to the floor with a doctor's second opinion about a health care law, which, as the New York Times Sunday front page said, doctor shortage likely to worsen with health law, primary care is scarce, expanded coverage but a greater strain on a burdened system. And as I have been saying for a number of years here on the Senate floor, coverage will not necessarily translate into care. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Act.